And I'd go to my dressing room and just go, oh, I'll never be able to be with her.
What did Julia Roberts, Gwyneth Paltrow, and Cameron Diaz all have in common? They all dated Matthew Perry. Don't believe me? You're never going to believe the tragedy of how such a beloved man sadly ended up passing away alone. His first girlfriend was someone whom Matthew credited for saving his life. Gabrielle Barber dated Matthew long before he became famous for his friend's role. Unfortunately, even while he was with her, Matthew struggled with drinking. Now, things weren't all bad. Matthew didn't even realize he had a problem while dating Gabrielle. When he started constantly getting intoxicated, however, Gabrielle was the one to make him realize that he did actually have a problem. She helped him enter rehab for the first time, which he said saved his life. Sadly, the relationship wasn't destined to last and Matthew moved on to a brief fling with Valerie Bertinelli. But this story gets a little weird. Matthew and Valerie never officially dated, but they did have a bit of an affair. You see, Valerie was actually married at the time to Eddie Van Halen, the famous musician. She and Matthew had met on the set of Sydney and hit it off. Matthew had been crushing on her, and apparently, she had been feeling the same despite being a married woman. Supposedly, the two found themselves giving into their feelings one night when Valerie's husband was only a few feet away. Eddie was passed out on a chair, and Matthew and Valerie started to make out on the couch next to him. Matthew told Valerie, literally right there where her husband was sleeping close by, that he had wanted to kiss her for a long time. She confessed that she felt the same way. The heated affair wouldn't last too long, however, and Valerie being married certainly complicated matters. Now, Matthew credited the next woman he dated for being his first, if you know what I mean, Trisha Fisher, the half-sister of the famous Harry Fisher. And Matthew started dating in 1988, and it started off super cute. The two really liked each other and were investing in each other emotionally. They'd eventually go their separate ways and then end up rekindling their romance while Matthew was filming Friends. The relationship could have been the one, but Matthew had a deep-rooted fear that Trisha would leave him. He ended up calling things off and went back to living the single life. Now, there was a very interesting point in Matthew's life where he was hanging around big stars without being a big celebrity himself. Just before Friends aired and his fame shot up overnight, Matthew was actually enjoying a summer romance with Gwyneth Paltrow. They were together for a whole summer just enjoying each other's company. Matthew couldn't quite believe that Gwyneth could actually fall for someone like him, so he ended that fling before it could really grow too. Gwyneth has even recently spoken about that summer in a tribute to Matthew's passing. She said that it was a magical summer where they went swimming in creeks and made out in a field of tall grass. Could something have blossomed between the two if Matthew hadn't gotten into his own head about it? Maybe, but he'd have a long road still to tread with his problems with drinking. Gwyneth wasn't the only big name celebrity that Matthew attracted. Enter Julia Roberts. Yes, Julia Roberts of romance and drama fame once dated Matthew, yet this relationship too was doomed to fail. How the two met, however, makes the perfect story of romance. Julia had expressed interest in doing a guest character for Friends. She specifically stated, however, that she wanted a character that was linked to Matthew's. The producers ate this up and had Matthew contact Julia to get her on board. Matthew ended up sending her dozens of roses in an attempt to finalize the offer, which is pretty romantic. He even ended up flying down to New Mexico where she was living with her family. He met Julia and her family, and in the end, he developed feelings for her. By the time Julia started filming for Friends, the two were officially dating. Matthew considered this time both one of his happiest and most difficult. He loved Julia, but the pressure of being a nobody compared to her incredible fame constantly terrified him. He was so sure that she was going to break up with him because of his status in Hollywood that he beat her to it. After only 2 months of dating, Matthew called it off, which surprised Julia. She had been very interested in the relationship and she considered the moment truly heartbreaking. Once more, Matthew's inner demons would ruin his chances at lasting love. Gabrielle Allen was his next attempt at love. While the relationship wouldn't last, it did mark an important moment in his life. He realized that he had a real problem with drinking. Gabrielle would become a friend for life, and it would allow him to date his next girlfriend, Jamie Tarsis. Matthew had to wait for Jamie to divorce her husband, Dan McDermott, who worked as a producer for Fox. It was a difficult time for the couple as Matthew was in the throes of his problems with drinking. Jamie helped him as best as she could and even ended up becoming sober during part of their relationship, yet that actually spelled the end of their time time together. Despite all the hard work Jamie had put in to help him, he thought it was the best that now, in his right mind, she'd be free of him and his problems. He broke up with her and then started a scandalous relationship with Rachel Dunn. What made fans and the media ready to cancel him? Well, he was 35 years old when he started dating Rachel, who was only 19 at the time. But despite the age difference, the two had a very loving relationship. Matthew was sober by this point, and the relationship lasted for 2 years before it was mutually ended. Matthew's relationship went big again when he was briefly linked with Cameron Diaz. Following Cameron's breakup with Justin Timberlake, the two were set up on a date. It did not go well. Matthew attempted to say something witty, but Cameron wasn't amused. She accidentally hit him in the face instead of the shoulder. While there weren't any hard feelings, the two were clearly not quite meant to be. There was one woman who Matthew thought he could have had it all with if his commitment issues hadn't gotten the best of him. That was Lizzy Caplan. The two dated for 6 years before Matthew ended up breaking up with her. There had even been talk of them getting engaged. Matthew knew he'd made a mistake when, in his memoir, he claimed that if he had kept things going with Lizzy, they'd probably own a home and have some kids together by then. While Matthew had quite a few small-time romances, his last big relationship before he passed away was with Molly Hurwitz. The two dated for several months and even became engaged, which shocked everyone, though no one knows what ultimately caused the relationship to fail. They both decided to end the relationship before becoming married. Now, I know what you're wondering. Did Matthew and Jennifer Aniston ever date? Apparently, the desire was there on Matthew's part, but definitely not on Jennifer's part. He had even tried to ask her out, and she gave him a very firm rejection. The two would go on to become best friends, however, and Jennifer was among the Friends cast that kept in close touch to help him with his drinking problems. Even with Matthew's failed romances, his exes tended to remain friends with him. Although Matthew was unlucky in love, he left behind dozens of loving friends and thousands of fans who all loved him. I think we can all agree that the news of his passing was devastating. But what do you guys think? Were you a fan of Matthew? Let me know in the comments below.